it's like this like cis supremacist sort of attitude where it's like being cis is normal, and then if you're, maybe there's some other weird aberration that like is only done by like the occasional, mentally ill degenerate freak or whatever. That sort of idea is, I think it's a lot more prevalent in a lot of academic circles than a lot of people think. Like, consider the gender roles in the society in which somebody existed. Did they identify as trans? Well, that wasn't a word for them. And so it would be silly for them to identify as that because that wasn't a word. But at the same time, were they transgressing or stepping outside of the boundaries within their society around their gender? Yes, they clearly were. There's no reason to believe that a world where people were in it, but trans people were not, has ever existed or will ever exist. So long as humanity continues to endure, so too shall we.
Hi, I'm Renee, and I'm a gender-affirming voice teacher. And welcome to Speaking Freely, an interview series about trans voice, trans advocacy, and trans liberation. Today, I'm so excited to introduce you to Sophie Edwards, who is a classical studies scholar, a voice feminization coach, a fiction author, and the creator of We Have Always Existed, a video essay series exploring the wealth of transgender history and mythology in the ancient Mediterranean.
From History Times.
In this interview, we talk about how Sophie came to specialize in ancient Mediterranean trans history, the epistemological messiness of applying the word transgender to people from thousands of years ago.
Sounds messy.
Why cisgender researchers have so consistently missed or ignored these stories, and the through line Sophie sees between amplifying trans voices from the ancient world and helping living trans people find their voices today.
That sounds messy. Okay.
We also talk about her gender liberationist approach to voice coaching and her debut science fiction novel. If you've ever wanted to feel more rooted in a trans history that goes back further than you probably imagined, this conversation is for you. Check it out. Hi, Sophie. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hello, Renee. Thank you for having me.
I am so excited to chat with you about your YouTube channel because I spent the last week watching it and learning so much. Your channel, We Have Always Existed, focuses on transgender history in the ancient Mediterranean. And I was just wondering, where did this start for you? Like, how did you get into this particular field?
Oh, it started back in my undergrad. I went to school, thought I was going to be a teacher. I guess I kind of am, but not really in the way I was expecting. But I wanted to study history because I always found, Greek and Roman studies to be really interesting. So I was thought, okay, well, I'll do history. And then I discovered that there was this entire field called classical studies, which was very specifically focused on history, like not history, but focused on the ancient Mediterranean. So yeah, it's history, but it's also like literature, language, art history, archaeology, sociology, political science, a bunch of other stuff too, just understanding that period in general. And pardon me, I did my undergrad in that. And then later on, people were talking about, I saw after I started transitioning, people were talking about how, have you heard of these like priestesses that drank horse pee to trans their gender? And I was like, well, no, I hadn't. So I looked more into it and realized nobody was out there really doing anything that like helped put this into like something that's easy to understand. And I thought, well, I have the background in it, so why don't I do it? So here I am.
Yeah, I think that's what I really related to when I was watching your channel. I feel like both you and I are kind of doing like science communication. I guess it's called science communication when it's about science. Maybe it's called something different when you're talking about other fields in academia. But we're taking these big topics and making them like understandable to lay people. And I think that's really cool.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I think so too.
So I feel like a lot of trans people turn to history to like validate our existence today. And like see, trans people existed throughout history, so our existence is natural or has a precedent. But in doing so, they may accidentally take on this like unacademic exercise of confirming biases, right? And what I like about your channel is your curiosity, and you seem to approach the material like like ready to learn what it has to offer you rather than looking for proof of what you already believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. But I just wanted to know, like, how do you maintain that level of intellectual honesty when the stakes are so high for trans people right now?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I just want to be clear that, like, yes, a lot of people do derive validation from the fact that trans history exists. And that is beautiful. And that is part of the reason why I'm doing this work. But I also think it's important to make clear that even if trans history was not a thing, even if trans people were this new thing that popped up in the last 15 years or so, and again, we obviously are not, but even if that were the case, that would not invalidate us. And that's something that I run into sometimes because I'm worried that, like, I don't know, maybe I've been around the block a few times, so I think about back in like the 90s and early 2000s and the when I first started noticing the like gay rights movement, and I noticed that it was like, oh, being gay is not a choice, and I do believe that, but I also think that it's sometimes used in a weird sort of way, and like being gay is not a choice, so it's not their fault that they're evil heathen sinners, right? And I never want that to come across. I always want to make it clear that, like, even if our history only went back 10 years or so, that would not invalidate our existence.
100%.
But it turns out that it doesn't. It does go back a lot further. So that is a bit of a moot point, I suppose. I don't know. You're right that the stakes are fairly high these days. But at the same time, I think that in particular is what keeps me intellectually honest as well. When I was doing the Elagabalus video, for example, at first, the initial conversations that I saw around this figure were like, "Oh my gosh, she was an ancient trans woman," and like that may be true, but it also may not be. And the reasonable interpretation is to say that we don't actually know, and there are reasons to believe Elagabalus was or was not a trans person. It might have been that they were the victim of a political smear. And so if I go into it just with this like exuberant, excited, oh my gosh, look at this, whatever, like that in itself is way too easy to shoot down, right? Because like then, of course, and I'm having like several thoughts here at once. My channel is not geared toward right-wingers. It's not geared toward transphobes. I don't care what they think. They're welcome to watch my stuff. If they comment with transphobic garbage, I just shadow ban them and move on with my life. I don't care about their, reasonable arguments or whatever nonsense they bring to the table. However, I also have to recognize that with an increased scrutiny upon us, we don't have the same luxury as like chud cishet white dudes do when they think like, oh yeah, I'm a big Spartan warrior. Like we don't get that privilege of just getting to like cherry pick whatever historical representation we find. We have to live in reality, unfortunately. And so I don't even really think I have a choice in the matter.
Right, because as a trans woman, you're held to a higher standard, unfortunately, of intellectual honesty.
Indeed.
Yeah. So I came into this conversation and into your channel as someone who doesn't like never studied history. I don't know how to engage with like historical ideas with a sense of scrutiny. And whenever I like digest historical information, it's just like I'm just like here for the vibes. I'm like, la la la, this is so nice. And I read, Before We Were Trans by Kit Hyam, and I read A Short History of Trans Misogyny by Jules Gill Peterson. And what I learned about myself while reading those things and watching your channel is that I have no idea how to tell like what is a quality piece of historical information from what is not one. Like I'm just listening to the stories with like, I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm a gullible person and I will believe anything told to me. So I'm just wondering, what would you say to somebody like me who's trying to get into this topic, like trans history, to stay vigilant about what they are consuming.
Sure. And that's one of the reasons why my channel's focus has been on the ancient Mediterranean. There's lots of different areas of history where you can find trans people. As far as I know, just about everywhere I've looked, I've found something that may be interpreted as transness. But I don't have the cultural competency and real historical understanding of, say, ancient, like, or feudal Japan, for example. Are there trans people there? Honestly, I don't know. But if I did hear about them, I would not be the one to do that research, because I just don't, I did my undergrad in classical studies, so I've spent a long time researching and covering this stuff. I'm able to kind of like parse through like nonsensical arguments in a way that I wouldn't be able to if I were doing something on feudal Japan, just as an example. I would say be wary of anybody who tries to present themselves as a general authority. And that's also one of the reasons why all of my videos are so bloody long, because I want to, like, I know that my audience is not by and large my fellow historians. And so when someone like you comes along who is really interested in the topic but doesn't have the background in it, I still want you to be able to have an understanding of what we're talking about. So that's why I talk about things like the era in which we're talking, sometimes the city in which like the person lived, if we know that, the region, what its relation to like other like major historical figures you might have heard of, like the more popular ones like Julius Caesar or Alexander the Great, stuff like that. That's why I provide so much background information. So I'm trying to show my notes, essentially. I don't know, that doesn't really answer your question though, does it? For like other eras, I guess.
Maybe just that, showing your notes.
Yeah.
Looking for people with citing sources and being able to like quote sources directly rather than just sharing vibes, I suppose.
Exactly. I did my most recent like essay style video was calling out another trans creator who had created a history video that, you know, I don't have anything against him personally, and I feel a little bad about doing it, but at the same time, like, I don't know, it's important to know this sort of stuff and to you know, cite your sources and show your receipts. So I think that's the key, is just know where those arguments are coming from, because anybody can say anything.
The truth. You said something just a second ago, interpreted as transness, something historical that could be interpreted as transness. And I think when people like are first approaching trans history, they're like, I don't know, maybe other people have had this experience. It can kind of be sad that there's no one identifying as transgender like 2,000 years ago, obviously, since this is a rather modern term. So in the place of the word transgender, we interpret things as transness. And I saw this a lot in Before We Were Trans and in A Short History of Trans Misogyny. And I just wonder, like, it's kind of like epistemologically messy, right? Like what is and is not considered trans. So how do you do the work of parsing that as you do your research?
Yeah, it is a question that is worth asking. And I've probably answered this question more than any other single question that I've ever, that's out there. So you're right that 2,000 years ago, people were not identifying as trans, but also 2,000 years ago, people were not identifying as cis or as gay or straight or anything like that, because those terms didn't really exist. And so is it that there was no such thing as trans people 2,000 years ago? Well, I think it's a little silly to have that interpretation, but at the same time, the specific way that transness, that we understand transness today, obviously that's a different story. So on one hand, that's true. On the other hand, if we get too bogged down into like just interpreting and hand-wringing and like all this sort of, it becomes boring, honestly. And so the way I approach it is the same way that that historian Susan Stryker approaches it, where apologize, I don't have the specific quote in front of me, but it's basically saying like, if like consider the gender roles in the society in which somebody existed. Did they identify as trans? Well, as transgender? Well, I mean, if they were Greeks or Latins or Romans, or Egyptians or Scythians or whatever, that wasn't a word for them. And so it would be silly for them to identify as that because that wasn't a word. But at the same time, were they transgressing or stepping outside of the boundaries within their society around their gender? Yes, they clearly were. And so that that way it just allows us to kind of sidestep that like constant hand-wringing that like ends up with the same sort of mentality that leads like cishet literary researchers to question whether or not Sappho was a lesbian.
Right. Yeah. So they, you define transgender as, I'm not saying you personally, but if one defines transgender as transgressing the gender roles of the time, then it's like much easier to like pointedly say who is doing that and who is not doing that. Makes total sense.
Yep, absolutely.
You've written about how cisgender researchers gloss over or ignore these stories entirely, or rather you were mentioning this at the top of our interview. And I was wondering if you have a sense of why this happens. I have an intuitive sense of why this happens, but I was wondering if you could speak on that. Is it like just unconscious filtering or active suppression or what?
Yeah, so it's kind of a like perfect storm of so many different elements. There's the simple answer is that the older something is, the less likely it is to survive. And so there are so many questions about the ancient Mediterranean in general that we can't currently answer, and a whole lot more that we will just never be able to answer. And so you get the like general filtration process of centuries upon centuries upon centuries of societal change and warmongers and people throwing things away that they don't realize are value, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the kind of like baseline layer. On top of that, there is, I guess, ignorance of interpreting, knowing how to recognize something as trans in the first place. For example, the Galai, the priestesses of the goddess Kybele, who I have argued repeatedly are very clear examples of trans people existing in the ancient world. I've seen them argued as just men who really felt the call to worship Kybele. And it's like, okay, well, lots of people feel called to worship the god or goddess or whatever. And most of them don't cut their junk off to do it. And most of them don't live as women to do it. Like it's just such pure nonsense. But if you view like it's like this like cis supremacist sort of attitude where it's like being cis is normal, and then if you're maybe there's some other weird aberration that like is only done by like the occasional mentally ill degenerate freak or whatever. That sort of idea is I think it's a lot more prevalent in a lot of academic circles than a lot of people think, and that's not necessarily because people are overtly transphobic or malicious or whatever, but just unconscious bias. But there is also a lot of like deliberate censoring of things over the years, which I've talked about as well. There's a gosh, I think it's Euripides, a Greek tragedian, and like there's one line where I don't know if am I allowed to swear on here?
You can. We will bleep you, however.
Okay, that's fair. All right, well, you bleep me however you need to. But the line is like, you must have him, but you maybe didn't realize, or something like that. And they changed it to be like completely unrelated to that. And that happens quite a bit. There is we dug up a lot of filthy, naughty stuff in Pompeii and Herculaneum when we dug those spots up. And there's a great book called Sex or Symbol, which is full of like erotic images from like ancient Greece and Rome, but a lot of it comes from Pompeii. And a lot of that was deliberately either destroyed or kept away from the public. There's a museum, I believe it's a wing of a museum in Napoli called the Gabinetto Segreto, the secret museum. And that was only opened to the public in the year 2000. Because before then, it was assumed that if you wanted to go in there, you were either a researcher who had legitimate reasons to do it, or you were some degenerate pervert. So there has been a lot of squeamishness and kind of like Victorian sensibilities about the ancient world in terms of sex in general, and anything related to queerness obviously falls into that too. So it's three kind of layers to it.
I see. Also, for the record, this channel is very pro mentally ill, degenerate freaks and perverts. Just
I am also pro degenerate, mentally ill freaks and perverts. I don't. Yes, I agree.
It's a fine line we walk here.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, so fascinating. I don't even know what to ask next. I think about like how what you said about the Galai and how they were seen as just men who happened to really want to worship this goddess. Like that kind of language is also not that exact kind of language, but that kind of language is also used for trans people today. Like, oh, they're just, what's the phrase that people always use for trans women? Autogynephilia. Like that's the same exact sentiment to describe modern day trans women.
Yeah.
And it's equally harmful, I believe.
Yeah. Well, when you view transness not through the lens of pathologizing, but through the lens of just a thing that some people do sometimes, or some people are sometimes, in the same way that some people have red hair, some people have brown hair, some people have black hair, whatever, then it becomes a lot easier to understand it. Like it's not just some weird thing. I mean, it is unusual in that we are not terribly common, but it's just a normal thing that some people do. And if you view it through the lens of pathologizing, then you end up with all the like weird freak sort of interpretations like autogynephilia or whatever, which is just doesn't stand up to scrutiny, but that doesn't stop people from clinging to their delusions.
Imagine if we were pathologizing red hair in the same way.
Or being left-handed.
Can you imagine that?
Literally impossible to imagine.
Okay. On top of being an incredible historian, you are also a voice coach. You teach voice feminization as another wing of your business. And I just wanted to know if you could tell my audience how you came to that, because I think that your journey towards becoming a voice coach is a unique one.
Sure, yeah. So a friend of mine is a speech therapist, and we'd only ever talked online, and so she'd never we met through an unrelated. She didn't know I was trans. I wasn't hiding it, but it had just never come up. And so at one point I mentioned that I was trans, and at that point she lost her shit. She was like, "What? Like, you're trans? Oh my gosh, how'd you get your voice like that? That's incredible." Before then, I had never realized that my voice was anything particularly noteworthy. I thought it was just, I don't know, I thought it was kind of clocky and kind of crappy, and just I was doing my best. I didn't realize it was anything noteworthy, but apparently it was. She ran a speech therapy clinic, and she wanted me to take care of her trans clients. And when she first approached me and asked me to do that, I was like, I don't know how to do that. And she's like, yes, you do. You already know how to do it. You just don't know that you know. So let me teach you what you know, and then you can help other people with what you already know. And so I tend to say yes and ask questions later in a lot of ways. Like what's the classic, jump off a cliff and build an airplane on the way down. That I've always just kind of been like that. When opportunities come to me, I tend to just take advantage of them. And worst case, I screw it up. But it seems like in this case, I didn't, because I've been doing this for about 5 years now. So
amazing. And do you see your history work and your voice work as connected in some kind of way?
To a certain extent, yeah, I do. I mean, there's the obvious, like, my clientele overlaps, obviously. I'm making videos for trans people. I'm helping trans people with their voices. But also it's a matter of like, trans voices are important, I think, and perhaps that's a little self-serving, but trans voices are important, and for a lot of trans people, I don't need to tell you this, for a lot of trans people, their voice being incongruent with who they are means they feel like they're not able to voice what they feel. And I don't know, they're like, I clearly never shut up. And so I like to talk. And so if I were in a position where I was made to feel like, and I shouldn't say this hypothetically because I've been there, back when I didn't know yet how to change my voice and I was feeling like really, really not so great about it, it was really stifling, and it didn't feel good. And so I want trans people to be able to have the freedom to be able to express themselves. And that's true of trans people whose stories from 2,000 years ago that I'm digging up, and trans people who are still living today.
I love that. I can't remember what you say on your website, but like your masthead is like trans voices in the past and present, or can you remind me of what you say on your website?
It's present and future. Yeah. 'Cause I have a sci-fi novel that I wrote as well.
Oh my God. Can we just be friends? You're so cool.
I try.
Oh my gosh. Can you tell us about that? Is it published now?
Yeah, sure. So it's a very silly situation because it was published back in December 2024. And then like 6 months later, the publisher went out of business. So, I do have the rights to the manuscript. I do not have the rights to the current book design. So I'm currently working to get a new cover and everything designed. So for now, it exists here and in the hands of the few dozen people that bought it while it was available, and in a big box in the corner over there. So,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's pretty frustrating.
That sounds incredibly frustrating. I have a collection. You can't really see. Can you see in the background here?
I can see some. Yeah.
All these books here are science fiction written by women from the 20th century. So I have a big love in my heart for women writing science fiction. And so I'm going to need a copy of that stat for this collection.
Well,
I'm
happy to send one off to you.
Oh, please. Do you have a newsletter where people can get updated on the progress of that book or on things that you're doing?
I have there's a opt-in on my site where people can sign up there, but also I post on Blue Sky and on YouTube all the time as well. So
okay, we're going to leave links to all that stuff in the description.
Awesome.
Okay, do I have any other questions? I just wanted to comment. I was like reading so much beautiful things on your website. You have like a gender liberationist view to trans voice training, which I think really aligns with mine. You say if you're a woman, your voice is a woman's voice. And I always say that. If you're a woman, you have a woman's voice. And if you want to also change it, you can. Can you speak on that a little bit, like how that informs like how the coaching sessions go?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's layers to it, like in everything. There is the ideal that we hold. It seems both of us hold that whatever your voice is, whatever your gender is, that's what your voice is, right? If you're non-binary, you have a non-binary voice because you are non-binary. However, there is the balance between affirming one's gender internally and dealing with how one's gender is interpreted externally. And there's a nuance to that, in that obviously for binary trans people versus non-binary trans people, it's different. So obviously most binary trans women, for example, want a more passively feminine sounding voice. That's not true of everybody, obviously. I'm painting broad brushes here, but you know what I mean. And so it's like, okay, well, you already have a woman's voice, but at the same time, you're being misgendered over the phone all the time, and you're being sirred when you're at a restaurant and stuff like that. And that sucks. So I always am careful to walk the line of making sure that, I'm affirming the person sitting across from me, but I'm also not condescending and being like, well, you have a woman's voice anyway, so don't worry about it. It's like,
Right.
that's kind of a boneheaded approach, right? In the same way that like, oh, well, I was already a woman before I started HRT, but I still needed HRT. So like, yeah, there's there's layers.
Absolutely. Yeah, I always say that there's like two goals, like the voice that satisfies you and the voice that allows you to move through the world with the most ease. And maybe those two things are congruent and sometimes they're not. And that's really annoying.
Yep. And I mean, you probably hear this quite a bit in your practice as well, that like a lot of girls come to me saying that like one of their kind of like secondary goals is to be able to DM more effectively in D&D. So they can do more characters.
I do, in fact, hear this all the time.
It's so funny.
I love it. Okay, so the name of this program, this interview series, is Speaking Freely. So I like to leave a little time at the end to allow you to speak freely about something. So what's something that you wish more trans people knew, either about their voice or their history?
Oh my gosh. Geez, putting me on the spot here. So it's
Sorry.
kind of, that's okay. That's okay. I think it's honestly just I say it at the end of almost every video, is that we have always existed. And that is true as far back as we have been able to look thus far. As far back as I've looked, we've found things that, again, could be interpreted as trans. And there's no reason to believe that a world where people were in it, but trans people were not, has ever existed or will ever exist. So long as humanity is here, I say it again, so long as humanity continues to endure, so too shall we. So regardless, we're here.
Thank you so much for speaking with me today, Sophie. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, so my website, just pretty simple, sbedwards.co. There's also my YouTube channel, which is called We Have Always Existed. I'm on Blue Sky at Transgender History, and on Instagram, I don't check it that often, but at transgender.history.
We'll leave all those links in the description below. Thank you so much for speaking with me today, Sophie. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. This was great.
Bye. Thank you so much to Sophie for sharing her knowledge, her history, and her voice with us today. You can find links to We Have Always Existed on YouTube, her voice coaching services, her Blue Sky, and updates on her novel at sbedwards.co. All linked in the description below. Seriously, go watch We Have Always Existed. If you love Verity Ritchie, Philosophy Tube, or Alexander Avila, you'll love Sophie's videos too.
Occupation, stand-up philosopher.
What?
Stand-up philosopher.
If you want to explore more conversations like this one, check out my Speaking Freely playlist, where I talk to trans voice practitioners, educators, artists, and advocates from all over the world. If you like this episode, I recommend checking out my conversation with Amara Olim-Cray, a trans woman who found her calling in audiobook narration after finding her voice in trans voice training. And let me know in the comments, who would you like to see next on Speaking Freely? That's all for today. I've been Renee, and I hope this helps.
Perfect. There
Great.
we go.
Done.